Hey everybody, welcome to the next installment of our pastoral devotions for our church family at First Baptist Lake Butler. I want to ask you a question to start off this devotion today. What do you think is the right response to God? After you've read the Bible, after you've learned what you've learned through your life and been around the people of God, what do you think is our right response to God? Well, if you're wondering, Psalm 95 answers that question, and it's so great, it's so nice, it's so concise, and it shows us very deeply how we should respond to God. So if you've got a copy of God's Word, turn it on or open it to Psalm 95. It says, "O come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. Let us come into his presence with thanksgiving. Let us make a joyful noise to him with songs of praise. For the Lord is a great God, a great King above all gods. In his hand are the depths of the earth. The heights of the mountains are his also. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. O come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord, our Maker. For he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, and the sheep of his hand. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as at Meribah, as on the day of Massah in the wilderness, when your fathers put me to the test and put me to the proof, though they had seen my work. For 40 years I loathed that generation, and said, they are a people who go astray in their heart, and they have not known my ways. Therefore I swore in my wrath, they will not enter my rest." Just to quickly give a slight amount of background to this psalm, if you don't know the story of Israel, Israel was a nation that were enslaved in the land of Egypt. They were forced to do what they didn't want to do. They were, life really stunk for them. But then God used this guy named Moses to take them out of slavery. There's some huge things that God did, these like plagues. He sent hail and did lots of things, including this kind of culminating time called the Passover, where God actually took out the oldest son of every family in Egypt, except the nation of Israel. So there's this big kind of event, and it's sad, but it's also amazing that God's rescuing his people, and he takes them out of that slavery and starts bringing them towards a land that he's promised to give them. Everything's great. They should follow God, right? They should know, look, this God is on our side. We should follow him. He is the king of everything. He's worth trusting wholeheartedly. And do they do that? No, they don't. This story, this psalm actually takes us back to a story in Numbers chapter 20 when Israel didn't trust God. It was at this place where they wondered if God would even provide water, which to us sounds kind of crazy. If God's taken them out of slavery, of course he could provide water, but ultimately they went astray in their heart, as this psalm says, and they, in verse 9, just even though they saw what God did, they saw his work, they chose not to believe. And so that brings us back to our question. What is the right response to God? Well, obviously this poet here in this psalm is saying the wrong response is not to trust. The wrong response is not to worship. But he begins the psalm, I think, with the right response. He says, let's sing, let's make a joyful noise, let's come into his presence with thanksgiving, let's do all these things, let's worship, verse 6, let's kneel before the Lord, our Maker. He says the right response to God is worship, is thankfulness, is coming to God on his terms. And what's great, he gives two reasons for that. If you read in the ESV, there are two times that he says for, or we could translate that because, in verse 3 and verse 7. So here are two reasons why we should come to God in worship and thanksgiving. The first reason is because he's great. Look at verse 3. The Lord is a great God and a great King above all gods. Over all the spiritual powers of the world, our God, Yahweh, the one true God, is King. He is over them. He is so large, he's so great that in his hand are the depths of the earth. Think of like the deepest place on earth, like the Marianas Trench, I think, is like thousands of feet deep in the ocean. Or also the heights of the mountains are his, to the top of Mount Everest. Both of those opposites, God is still bigger than those measurements that we can think of. The sea is his because he made it. All of this stuff, God is great. Then the second reason is that he is ours. Look at verse 7. He is our God. We are the people of his pasture. The poet is kind of reveling and rejoicing in the fact that God is a personal God. That not only is he high and above and powerful and king, but he's also close to us. He's immanent. He is there. And we get to be his people. If we're the people of his pasture, that means that God cares for us in this close and intimate way. If we're the sheep of his hand, he feeds us right from his hand. I mean, that's incredible. So those are the two reasons I think the poet gives us today to tell us the right response to God is to worship him, is to be thankful. So I hope that's an encouragement for you today. And I'm so thankful that we get to serve a God who is great, who is king, but who also is close to us and who is ours. So I'm praying for you guys, and go in peace.